Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, we are the podcast that bring you a wide variety of guests that can talk about a lot of diverse topics. You know, we want to help our small business entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. We want to try to help our audience to maybe think about some things that they haven't thought about that could help them, or if they are having some struggles, we want to point them in the right direction. And so today, no different. We have an awesome guest, Mary Sullivan. She is an executive leader in the financial services industry with over 30 years of experience. She began her career after completing her master's in Spanish and undergraduate in political science. Mary has held many leadership positions that involve starting new businesses around the globe, architecting service models, and leading bilingual call center teams, all with business and leadership development at the center. With her passion for helping women and underrepresented groups, Mary has been an advocate for organizations that support and promote all women. Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Rock the Wall Street, hashtag I Am Remarkable, Facilitator, and many others. Mary believes being fearless means taking risk and holding herself and those with power accountable to be their best. She encourages everyone to learn and evolve no matter where they are in their life stage. Learning is a journey, not a destination, and Mary has continued her professional growth at Harvard Business School and Cornell. Mary, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking time. And I did want to mention that you now are with Sweet But Fearless, and y'all help women, whether they're entrepreneurs or in the corporate world, y'all just help them to gain those in order to advance to wherever they want to go.
That's right, Roy. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm so excited to be here. And exactly right. You know, after pivoting from corporate to entrepreneurial, I learned so many things through interacting with other entrepreneurs and specifically, yes, helping the women as they maneuver and become leaders, whether it's corporate or entrepreneur, all the different skills they need to level up, right? To get to that next rung on the corporate ladder, on the entrepreneurial ladder. And there's so much interfacing between the two that, you know, I just think of myself as an entrepreneur now.
Right, exactly. No, and I think, you know, that's great because actually I had in a previous conversation I was having this morning with somebody, we were talking about just that value of collaboration. It's not only to learn, you know, like from a mentor perspective, but sometimes it's just being able to bounce ideas off of people you trust. And you know, I love the what I call that brainstorming phase is, you know, somebody throws out A, and maybe A is not the answer, but A plus B, you know, maybe D or C is, but being able just to have that person to talk things out is, it's an invaluable.
You know, that's one of the number one skills that I've learned that has transferred over from corporate to entrepreneur, and that is building your advocacy team, building that trusted, you know, advisor group, all of those colleagues that maybe as an entrepreneur, especially if you're a solopreneur by yourself. I mean, I'm blessed. I have two colleagues with me working, but you don't get to those meetings that you used to have in an office. You're not sitting around a table chatting and brainstorming. You're maybe sitting around the Zoom table or the podcast table, but it is more that you have to learn how to reach out to others in your industry. And when you're in the corporate world, I don't know if you're doing that as much. You know, I wasn't always reaching out to I did on some committees, but you weren't always reaching out to other financial analysts and financial relationship gurus to find out, you know, what stocks they're picking or what they're advising. You were kind of keeping those secrets to yourself. Right, but I have found in the entrepreneur space, oh my gosh, specifically with all of the great social media, that people are willing to share and to teach you how they started their business or what they stumbled through when they first began so that you don't do the same. And I've just found this to be just a wonderful community, and I'm so glad. But that you bring that skill, right? You bring that skill of mentoring from your previous into the entrepreneur or any skills that you wanted to. But wow, collaborating and relying on others, you just have to do it. It's a must do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point that we don't really take this into account, but even when you're in a company, you can always find a, you know,
call it different things, but sometimes they set up a council of peers, or maybe, skip levels where it's multiple people, if it's a mentoring, or just where you can not feel alone. And if you transition to the entrepreneurial world, we need to think about recreating that as well, whether, trusted advisors, kind of like maybe a board, an advisory board that you put together. And I've even heard of some groups of competitors or close competitors in a market that they meet and have a round table, because it's like, they may have you may have a problem that they've had in the past. So instead of you struggling by yourself, you can be collaborative with other people. So a lot of ways to solve that, but it definitely helps, especially as you transition. So when you transition from the corporate world to more of the entrepreneurial area, what were some challenges that you personally ran into?
Oh, there are many. There are many challenges that I ran into because it wasn't my first rodeo. I tried to transition from corporate to entrepreneur back in the early 2000s, and it was right before the 2008 crash. So it just didn't work out. I started a coffee house,
Okay.
and I made probably the typical mistakes that most people do when they try to open up a eatery or a food business. And I invested in the real estate. I invested in a lot of tables and chairs and a lot of things that wouldn't pay me back, you know,
Right.
versus trying to start small and then go big. So I learned from that. And so this time around, when I was pivoting from corporate to entrepreneur, I kept my day job while I was getting the entrepreneur business going. So that was the first lesson I learned is, hmm, make sure you have some income coming in as you're learning new things. That was lesson number one. And number two was really do something not only that you're passionate about, but that you know about, right? That you really have a deep, not only connection, because I think a lot of times people maybe take a hobby into a business, and I didn't want to do that this time. I wanted to take a strength into a business. And so that's why I focused with my colleagues on career counseling, on helping women and men level up in their career, because that's what I did for 30 years, right? I helped thousands of people get promoted. So why not do that now as my own business? So one, I learned stick to something you know and you know well, but yes, that you also love. And number two is to do a lot of research. I'm kind of
Yeah.
an impetuous person, so I probably jumped in previously to something too soon without doing a lot of research and just thinking my confidence and grit would get me there. I learned over the years, yes, that's a good start, but you also need knowledge and understanding of how everything works in the entrepreneur space. So I did a lot more research this time around, Roy. That has made a difference. And just like you said, I did create an advisory board. I didn't go into it thinking I know everything. I went into it thinking I know a little and I need to know a lot more, but I can get started. I'm not going to wait till I know everything. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do. They wait until it's perfect, and no way. I wasn't waiting till perfect, but I did wait until I had a better understanding. So those are three things I feel I learned this time around, and that kind of as I was pivoting.
Yeah. And it does make it a little easier to ease into it, to, well, not only to do that research, but also if you're able to keep that day job or a part-time job,
Yeah.
to have that income to help you in that startup. Because any business, well, if you're starting from zero, any business is going to take a little bit to get up and running. And unfortunately, I've done a lot of pro forma work in the past, and our pro formas are typically very optimistic. And
Yes.
so we always think we're going to get ramped up in the first month or two, and sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. So it's a very good thing, and it adds a little peace of mind where. The other thing is you're not always worrying about paying this month's rent or the car payment or whatever, because you need that creative energy. If you're starting a venture, you've got to have basically everything to give to it.
Roy, you should see my books on what we projected for revenue this year. Right. We had to, kind of back that up a little bit and say, wait, let's be a little more realistic.
Yeah.
But Yes, you have to have those high goals and then the reality of the bills. And I was fortunate. I mean, I was laid off. So on one hand, that was unfortunate to be laid off in January 2021, but I was fortunate in knowing that in advance. So I had
Right.
time to prepare as well as, received a severance. So that was also very generous and nice because that does give you a little cushion as you are going forward in your entrepreneurship because it is hard because it's really hard when you're transitioning to go from income coming in to only going out. All you are doing is paying, and you're like, oh my gosh, when am I going to start making money? And then I think we start making poor judgment, right? We start utilizing poor judgment because we're nervous about income coming in. So that's another piece of advice is if you can, and if you can, save as much as possible so you relieve some of that stress, but also think of a product or service that maybe can go out quicker to inject some revenue for yourself, whether it's a service like we offer or ebooks or courses or whatever your entrepreneur business may be. That's one thing I learned too is maybe get something smaller out there to generate a little income to at least hold off, giving up
Right.
as you're getting ready for your bigger product or bigger service or coaching or whatever you're doing.
It's a high wire act because, you made a good point earlier is that sometimes we have analysis paralysis that we want to wait until we have every answer for every conceivable possibility. If the sun came up in the west tomorrow, how would it affect this? And, you just got to balance between that jumping out there, but still making it very calculated. I don't know how best to put. You still want to jump, but you may need to make sure your parachute's working too.
Strategic risk,
Yeah.
methodical risk taking. We have all those corporate terms for that, but that is true, right? Jump and have a parachute.
Yeah. So you brought up something that's good. I think that we can touch on. I don't know why it evoked this thought for me, but when we talk about planning, this works for the entrepreneur, but it also works for the person that's in the corporate. And one thing I've seen before, and I was guilty of in my younger days, is not really having a plan. Even in the corporate world, you just think things are going to happen, people are going to take care of you, and it's just the way things go. And I saw a lot of people get hurt because they didn't have a plan. And the old saying, what work what is it, plan your work and work your plan. And so you always have to be thinking, where do you want to end up and how am I going to get there? And that it's really true in the entrepreneurial space, but we can't forget that when you're in a corporation too, because you will get left behind.
Oh, Roy, you are definitely speaking to the choir here. I mean, I've been laid off twice, so I have experienced that. And a lot of our what we call our fearless nation is sweet but fearless. We talk about that because that's a lot of how it started was how can we help women and men who have recently been laid off, whether it was due to acquisitions and mergers, as mine was, or whether it was due to COVID or the pandemic, for whatever reason you are at your lowest because your confidence has been, really struck hard. But at the same time, you can be at your highest because now you have the freedom to do what you want if you have a plan. And in our podcast as well, we talk about that. And we have a lot of e-guides on it as well, really talking about thinking through while you have a job, what you would do if you didn't have a job, right? That plan you're speaking of. What if, do a lot of what if scenarios because again your mind is freer to think through it because doesn't have the stress of I don't have a job on your shoulders. You have a job, at least you have some income coming in so you can be a little freer in what you're thinking. Write it down, plan it out. What would it look like? Draw it. Some people are very pictorial, right? They want to draw everything or speak it into a microphone, whatever works for you, but it's do it, act on it, because you said that if the inaction will never get you anywhere, you have to take action. That we learned, as well as frankly not giving all your heart and soul to the company,
Right.
right? You just can't give up everything of yourself. You can't sacrifice all your family time. You can't sacrifice all of your own personal interests for this entity that at the end of the day will always make the business decision they need for themselves and their shareholders. If
Exactly.
they're publicly traded, you will be at the bottom of it. So Give
Exactly.
your great work to them, but don't give your heart and soul. Keep a little bit of it for you, because you're going to have to rely on it to get you forward. And I learned that the second time. The first time I was devastated. I was 17 years working for a firm, top performer, a leader, and they cut me, and I got an email telling me I was laid off. I was devastated, and I was hurt, I guess, like people going through a divorce. I was just really blindsided. Um, and I vowed I will not be blindsided again. So I would say the same thing in your entrepreneur space. I don't want to say have an exit plan in case things don't go wrong, because you have to go be all in, but do have some kind of plan for if things aren't going the way you want. What
Right.
will you do to get it back on track?
Yeah, and kind of that next step with that thought is sometimes as entrepreneurs or professionals, we I hate to say ego because I don't know that that's the right word, but basically, we let our ego get in the way that we know what we're doing, we know this path that we want, and we put blinders on to, as we talked earlier about this council of help, but also just listening and watching for those signs that, maybe if we're, if we're a good plumber, marketing may not be our thing. So reach out to somebody who does marketing and, get some tips from them. It'll be money well spent, or, whatever that looks like. But we have to have an open mind to listen, to get that input.
And also, I think, Freud, in addition to that, is even if you are good at it, maybe you should be spending your time elsewhere. And that's another thing I've learned in the entrepreneur space is, where is the space where I can make the biggest impact and or revenue, right? The biggest impact on my business. And that's where I need to spend 80% of my time, and only 20% in all the other things, even if I like all those other things. If I'm not
Yeah.
spending 80% of my time in the spot that only I can do, because I have two colleagues, right? So they also have their strengths. I
Right.
need them doing their strengths, and I need to stay in my lane, so to speak,
Yeah.
because it's easy to drift or see the shiny penny and go chase it. Or, hey, I heard a new way to grow my email list. Let me go do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's come back to it. Is it in our zone? Is it what we should be focusing on? Because it's really hard, because you are getting a lot of advice from many wonderful people.
Yeah.
You just can't implement everything. You do need to stay focused and stay on your plan
Yeah.
as much as you can.
Yeah, and that I think that even goes for the position that we take, because a lot of times that what I've seen before was a guy that started a business that was awesome in sales. Once the business grew, he hired salesmen, and then he tried to manage it and do the books and stuff that he could do, but it wasn't his strength. And so, and that when we just tried to reposition him and say, look, you can hire somebody that's good at books to do the books, but sales and selling your product or your service, that is your strength. You've got to go with it. And you can, you don't always have to be that manager person. You can be, out front doing what you do best.
That's right. And it's the same thing in the corporate world, right? When you moved up from, being a frontline manager to a senior manager, you had to pivot and use different skills. The same skills that got you the first job, where maybe you were really the best at what you did executing. But if you want to move up to the senior director level or EVP, et cetera, you have to start bringing more of your relational skills, more of your strategic skills forward, and being the expert at something maybe goes down a little lower. So it's all about moving different things forward. It's not that you don't have those skills, it's how we use them. And that's something I've definitely learned in the entrepreneur space, is that I have to find out more what the women that want to level up and move up in their career, what do they want? Not always just what do I think they need.
Right.
Right. I have to stop that thought and go to, what do you want? Tell me exactly what you want. How do you want it delivered? When do you want it delivered? Because it can't be just what I think it should be. I've learned, oh my gosh, you have to really survey and ask a lot of questions to make sure you don't just go out with your own thinking, and then you can fail.
Yeah, and that's a perfect analogy also to, just sales and listening to our consumer or our prospect to see what do they really, really need. So I think that message translates that, what is it? We got God gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth, so we should
That's
be
right.
listening twice as much as we're talking. It's hard to do as a podcast host, but it's good to live by because you do learn a lot. Sometimes you pick up those little keys, and I actually had a gentleman on not long ago that was like a body movement expert. He could, kind of read things in, and he said not only 2 ears, but 2 eyes. So we have to pay attention to all of our sensories, I guess, in order to get that. But one thing I was going to ask is, so what have you seen, or what are people struggling with the most now, whether it's in the corporate or whether they're, stepping out to entrepreneur? What have you been uh, kind of providing the most help with?
Oh, Roy, that's a great question. And I would say right now, specifically for my audience, the Sweet but Fearless audience has been all about the COVID-19, returning to office, the kids going back to school or not going back. It has been a rough year, and they were struggling a lot with balancing their careers and being either the mother in the home or maybe a caretaker of an elderly parent or just a woman, with all that was going on with the illnesses, et cetera, and being a nurturer in their family nucleus. So that was the biggest struggle, was how to keep moving forward in my career when all these other priorities are now pulling at me. And a lot of the data that we've been reading is reinforcing that 4 times the amount of women have left the workforce
Yeah.
than men. Now, I hope a lot of them are like me and are trying something entrepreneur and are really taking that advantage of that potentially and saying, well, now let me do something for myself and my family and my community, right? And my nation, let me do something. Uh, but I'm also a realist, and I know a lot of them aren't, and they're going to be struggling to get back into the workforce and not having to start over. And that's what they're telling me is, hey, Mary, I don't want to start over. I
Yeah,
shouldn't have to start over. I didn't take 6 months vacation. I took 6 months
exactly. Yeah,
because there was an illness or because I got laid off or I got furloughed. I'm
yeah.
trying to be a, productive citizen in the workforce. Help me out. And that's what they're wanting.
Yeah, and that's something I really haven't thought about till just now, is that, so many people, if they do return to a job, to go find a job, they're probably going to be starting all over, maybe a new position, maybe a new company.
Mhm.
Hopefully things will open up fast enough we might can find our way back to where we were. But I mean, that's kind of a real threat, is at I would hate to think at my age I was have to starting over, but the other part I was going to mention too is that, knock on wood, this is the first time in life that it's been a blessing to be old, because my kids are grown and gone, but I can't even imagine these young people that have had to deal with working at home, if they're lucky enough to work, but maybe even not working, having kids at home, trying
Yes.
to educate
Mhm.
them. I mean, what a trying time for so many people.
Roy, I say, my statement is we were all in the same storm, right? The COVID-19 storm, but we don't have the same boat.
Right.
Right. I had a different boat than others, right? My son too is older on his own, has his own career. So I didn't have someone that I needed to take care of other than myself. And then yes, you have these women in their 30s and 40s that have children at home and we're having to balance keeping them, occupied and teaching them and being that primary teacher and just all of the different things that we're pulling on them that, I just feel that we all have to be aware of each other's tools that they had to get through it.
Yeah.
And what can we do to help them? Right. That is why we started our business, because we wanted to help others that maybe weren't in a yacht during the storm, right? They were maybe in that little canoe or like a friggin' paddleboard, standing up trying to just get by, and we have to help them.
Yeah, and the other thing that you mentioned too is women typically tend to be the primary caregiver. And I know that I've worked in the senior living field for a long time, and usually it's the daughter-in-law that takes care of
Right.
everybody. And so now, we've got the kids at home, and a lot of these women have had aging parents or aging
Yes.
parents-in-law that they've also had to provide care for.
We call it the sandwich,
Right.
right? The mother sandwich, or the woman who has still kids, or maybe even older kids that have come back home, right? The basement dweller, or and they have the adult parents that they're taking care of, and we call it in the sandwich because they've got that both going on, and they're probably at the prime of their career. whether it's entrepreneur or corporate, they're in that prime spot in their career. Now they're like, oh my gosh, I have all of these competing priorities.
Yeah, or some that are unlucky to have partners like me that are probably, worse than a kid. They'd trade me for a 10-year-old in a heartbeat.
I didn't add that fourth one. Yeah. And then the spouse or significant other. Hey, we know we can't do anything without our allies. So while Sweet but Fearless talks about women and supporting women, believe me, we are all inclusive. We know it does take a village.
Oh, so I guess the other thing I was going to ask is kind of a predictive question, more or less. But so, what are y'all seeing as women and men come to y'all?
Mhm.
Are you seeing people that are going back to work more? Are they just preparing to go back? Do we think things are, are corporations starting to hire again for, I guess, mid-level to higher level jobs? Are y'all just seeing like everybody flooding back into the entry level, or kind of what is that looking like?
Definitely, we are seeing the corporations opening up. So that has been wonderful, right? That, I think a lot of people thought, well, due to the COVID, they're not going to go back into the offices, so they won't need as many people. And in my experience, and right now I know in the financial services industry, they're opening up offices and, safely and properly, but they're going back into the offices and working, and they've even elevated their hiring. So more opportunity is out there. I think it's just going to be a different kind of opportunity, Roy, in different roles. And that's what we're helping people do, is be prepared for those new roles, elevate certain skills, right? Make sure you know how to bring those forward, but also the art of the interview. A lot of people were laid off or displaced, and now they're having to go interview. And sometimes it's for the same company, sometimes it's for a newer company, and those interview skills are rusty. Well, that's what we spend a lot of time helping people is, let's help you prepare for that interview and win it the first time or the second time, so you don't get into that rut of 25, 35 interviews and you get discouraged, et cetera. We really want to help build that confidence through interview skills.
Yeah, and I was talking to a younger guy the other day that was telling me about the I guess the machines that recruiters and companies run these resumes through. It's a
Oh yeah, SRE, yeah, we use those.
ATI. Anyway,
ATS or something, yeah. Yeah.
basically, it's an automated machine. I think
Yeah.
it's important for people, especially of my age, is we made resumes that were pretty and functionable, that you took in and you actually handed it to somebody. But from what I've picked up lately is that you got to really, and I'll let you speak to this, but you basically almost have to have two. You've got to have one that you submit electronically that can make it through this automatic tracking system, but then you need the nice one to actually carry in if you get an in-person call to give to somebody. So can you speak to that just a little bit?
I sure can. And ATS, exactly right, that automatic system. And everything's algorithms, right? Whether it's marketing online and you are marketing online when you're finding a job, because now no one really walks in and hands a resume. Everything's online. The screeners, right? The recruiters are going through that. And definitely we talk about a lot in our courses and in a lot of our free downloads. So people can feel free to do that, is how you make sure that your resume matches the job description.
Right.
I know it seems like 101, Roy, but you find out that many people, because they haven't interviewed a lot, right? They haven't had to do it, are not thinking of, oh, the job is asking for project management. So let me find a way to say it 5 different ways in my resume so that however you describe project management, it's going to come up.
Right.
That's what we work with people on, ensuring that their resume does match the job they want.
Yeah.
Right. And match the needs of the company. But we also go a little further and we make sure that you are applying for the right jobs. And what I mean by that, it's not the ones you're going to get automatically, but applying for the ones you truly want and that match your interests, match your skills and your passion, and that you're not trying to fit the circle into the square. And knowing if you're applying for a company that maybe they're guiding principles are totally against yours. Well, why are you applying for there? And there's ways that people can research this for free and find it out. So we really help them kind of put the puzzle together so that when they go into the interview, that's just icing on the cake. They've already done all that research and reflection, and now they're ready to just be themselves and knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing too, I think that there's been a shift. Used to the resumes tended to be task oriented.
Yes.
Now we are more accomplishment or
Outcome. Yes.
outcome oriented.
Yes. Definitely that, as well as even in the interview itself, right? I think everybody's heard of the behavioral interview question. Tell me about a time when.
Right.
And so everybody knows they got to prepare and have at least, 7 or 8 examples and stories and that are going to, hit on different topics, are going to hit on their communication strength, their collaboration strength, their problem solving, and et cetera. So everything has become more about the outcome, and they even call it a STAR format. And you can Google that, STAR, and it's all about setting up the situation, the task, your action item that you did in it, and then the result.
Okay.
And they even grade you on it and say, well, if you don't talk about the result, then how do we know what you did with it? So
Right.
even in the interview format is that outcome as well as the resume. They want you to list your accomplishments and to be very specific. So make sure your audience knows to be very specific, not just I led a large team, right? I led 500 people in 3 divisions with, 3 million budget. Be very specific so that, again, when they're interviewing you and having that conversation with you, there's a story there you can talk about and you can differentiate yourself from others.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that I am not out there. I know it is tough. And I guess
It
when
is.
we have this initial scrum with everybody making the mad dash, probably for the first few months, it's going to be really tough and really rough out there.
Well, that's why a lot of people recommend, a lot of us, specialists, career specialists, we recommend don't wait until you've lost your job to go find a new job. Start always be networking, right? Use your LinkedIn, use your podcast connections, use all of your network and make sure you are building relationships now with confidence because you have a job. So you're much more confident. Do it now so that when it does happen, and it will happen probably in everybody's life, some kind of career pivot, you're ready. And at least you have a head start.
Right. Yeah. And, employers should be open. This is something that I preach all the time because I do a lot of work in employee retention is that as the employer, we don't need to wait till the slot comes empty to figure out who we want to plug in that. We need to do the same thing. We need to be reaching out. We need to be networking, talking, that way it gives us kind of I think it gives us that honeymoon period is that I'm not having to make a decision on you because you walked in my office 10 minutes ago. It's like I can watch your social media. Maybe we interact, once things open back up, we can go to a conference and see how people interact or, different things like that. But, definitely tell employers, recruiting is not posting a job on the internet. So, get out there. And so if you're on the other side, if you're the employee, don't be scared to reach out because you'll be doing the employer a favor by getting in touch with them and starting that networking process.
Make it easy for them to say yes. Pick me, right? That's what we always say. Make it easy to say yes. Part of the role I had when I was an executive in the financial services industry was recruiting, right? All leaders had to recruit and get the bench strength that you're referring to. And oftentimes we were, held accountable to having a deep bench because of the turnover. And you wanted to make sure that you didn't have a 6-month lag time between getting someone hired and onboarded, because that does take at least 6 months for someone to be onboarded properly. So having that bench strength was so important. Now, what companies don't allow us to always do is hire ahead.
Yes.
Right? They've learned that one back in the early 2000s that got them in trouble and had to lay off people because they hired too many ahead. But they'll usually give you a month or 2 leeway, so most companies, to if they see or know that someone's leaving, then for you to hire someone and get them onboarded. So yes, having that bench strength, whether you're the one hiring or you're the one wanting to be hired, network.
Exactly. Well, Mary, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to drop by and see us. Before we wrap up, first off, any other parting tips that you want to put out there before we go?
I would add to everyone that's listening, whether again you're an entrepreneur or corporate, it really doesn't matter because you are talent and you are trying to be successful in whatever space you're in right now. And I would say just make sure you really do know your interests and build your confidence. And if you're struggling with your own internal confidence, surround yourself with those that do love and support you and believe in you because they'll help build you up. Use them, especially
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur. You need it more than ever. But do
Yeah.
know that there's people that support you and let them give to you and let them support you. That's what
Yeah.
I would want to. Yeah,
Sometimes that's hard. We have people that
I
are
know.
around us that want to provide us help, and we don't want to bother them or whatever the reason is. But just be
That's
open
right.
to letting people help you because they truly do. And people, I found that people are so giving of themselves, whether it's
Yes.
time or their knowledge, that they will help. So that's all right. So, what is a tool that you use in your daily life? Could be a habit, it could be an app or something, but something that adds a lot of value to you professionally or personally.
I would say the tool I use the most, and it's probably going to be, obvious when I was talking all about career advice, but truly is LinkedIn.
Okay.
And that is a tool I use because not only when I was looking for a job, it was very helpful, but recruiting people, it was very helpful. And now I'm learning in the entrepreneur space, which I wasn't in before, so I didn't see it through that lens. It is amazing place to connect with people in groups and inventory of articles and information that can help anybody, no matter what your business is.
Right.
And they've even started adding new live functions and features. They're trying to evolve, right? They don't want to be left behind.
Right.
So they're evolving and they're competing with Clubhouse and Facebook and all sorts of other apps and sites. So that's one that I would say I use every single day, all throughout the day. Um, it's helped me, and I know it's helped many, many people that follow me and are in the industry. So I really like it.
No matter what side of the table you're on,
Yeah,
employee,
that's
employer,
right.
or the career path or the level, because I just get a lot of good information. I've got a lot of contacts, and and part of my litmus test is, I contact with people who are a lot smarter than I am, and a lot
Me
more
too.
successful with them because they're
Yeah,
putting out a lot of good information and things that I can certainly learn from. So yeah, definitely
exactly.
a great tool
And
to
you
use.
could repost, and it's not plagiarism because of course you're going to give them credit, right? But you can repost things as you're building your own business and your own credibility and your own voice. You can help leverage others' voices, just like you said, who are much smarter than me, much more talented. I leverage them all the time. And one piece I'll leave you with is recently I saw an article on there from Harvard, Business Review, and I thought, wait a minute, I did a podcast on that very topic 3 weeks ago. So I posted it and said, great minds thinking alike, So anytime you can tie yourself to someone a little higher, go
Yeah.
ahead and do it.
All right, well, Mary. Well, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. So tell everybody, at Sweet But Fearless, who are y'all helping? How are you helping them? And of course, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I definitely invite everyone over to sweetbutfearless.com. We have lots of PDFs and ebooks and e-guides and lots of free information to really help anybody going through a career transition who maybe wants it to be a career transformation, right? And not just have it happen to them, but be part of what's you're dictating how you move forward. So we have a lot of things over at our website, www.sweetbutfearless.com. We also have a podcast, the same name, Sweet But Fearless. And of course, we're on, LinkedIn, Instagram, everything under Sweet But Fearless. So we welcome you to come over and get to know us, join our mailing list. And if there's a connection, there's a connection. We'll see how we can help you.
All right. Awesome. Y'all reach out, see how Mary can help you. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you're in the corporate world, if you're
Right.
an entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur going to the corporate world, or somebody in the corporate world going to entrepreneur, reach out, see how they can help you there. Especially if you're of a certain age, things have changed
Yes.
so much that
Yes.
never really hurts to get a little refresher, kind of see what's the latest and greatest. And, as we talked about some things, maybe some different hurdles that you're going to need to cross as you do this. So, Again, thank you. And that's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. You can find us, of course, at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We are on all the major social media networks as well as the major podcast platforms, Stitcher, Google, Spotify, iTunes. If we're not on one that you listen to regularly, if you'll reach out, I'd be glad to get us added to it. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.